Chapter 10. Not the Johnny I Knew. The next day, Madison was outside on the balcony of the Baxter building and looking at the view of the city streets. Well, she was not focused on the city street. She was busy thinking about the panic attack. "Madison?" a male voice calls out softly, and Madison looks over to the doors of the balcony. "Hey, Johnny," Madison says before looking back at the streets before she sees Johnny walk over to her. Madison looks over to him as she does a little smile. "How are you?" Johnny asks as he leans against the railing. "Good, just..." Madison sighs to herself. Johnny did not push. Instead, he looks over to the streets, giving her space. "I just froze," Madison says, and Johnny looks over to her before putting a hand on her shoulder. "I don't know why. It was just a couple of questions, but it felt like I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't move, and you were..." Madison continued, but Johnny interrupted. "I was being an idiot," Johnny says, but Madison looks over to him. "No, I don't mean that," Madison says, but Johnny stops her with a finger to her lips, and Madison looks into his eyes as he does the same. Madison hesitates for a moment before pulling away, thinking it is too early for them to fall in love, but Johnny does not push. Instead, he backs up, giving her space. Madison looks over at the city street again and unconsciously lays her head on his shoulder when he pulls her close. They stayed like that for a while, watching the city. Neither of them spoke, but both felt it. Not love. Not yet. But something that might one day grow into it. I just pulled away, and Johnny didn't act like himself. Normally he would have flirted or get upset. He gave me space. Who the hell is he, and what has he done with the real Johnny? Madison thought to herself, but she quietly laughs to herself, capturing Johnny's attention. "What's tickling your funny bone?" Johnny asks as he looks at her from the corner of his eyes, before fully looking at her, face to face. Well," Madison stated, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve again. She glanced at Johnny, who was now fully facing her with that slightly amused, slightly suspicious expression, the one he usually wore when he knew someone was hiding something. She exhaled, half smiling, half embarrassed. "I was just thinking." She trailed off again, then looked down briefly before daring to meet his gaze. "You gave me space. You didn't flirt, didn't joke, didn't push." Johnny just blinked as he is waiting. "And I just thought..." He gave a soft, awkward laugh. "Who the hell are you, and what have you done to the real Johnny?" Johnny raised a brow, clearly trying to decide if he should be offended or flattered. "Ouch, that bad, huh?" Johnny asked, but there was no sting to it. Madison shook her head quickly. "No, not bad, just surprising. I am used to you being loud and cocky and, you." He smirked faintly. "So the moment I show a shred of emotional maturity, you assume I've been body snatched?" "Exactly," Madison replied, this time with no hesitation. Then she added more softly, "But thank you for knowing I needed that space, even when I did not know how to ask for it." Johnny did not reply straight away. Instead, he smiled, quieter than usual, more genuine. The kind of smile that did not need to be followed by a joke. "Anytime, Mads," Johnny says, and Madison lays her head on his shoulders again. And for a moment, the silence between them was warm again, and the nickname was spoken gently, like a promise. Madison looked at him. Really looked. Not the Johnny she was used to. The one who made grand entrances and inappropriate comments for attention. No, this was something else. A softer version. Quieter, but somehow more him than anything she had seen before. She does not know what to do with that, but she moves her head to face him again, taking in his features. Tousled blonde hair that always looks perfectly windblown without even trying. A jawline that could have been carved by the gods, sharp and strong, but soft in the way it relaxes when he is with her. The faint stubble lining his chin, the way his cheek dimples ever so slightly when he is not thinking about it. His ocean blue eyes are not smug tonight. No spark of mischief, no flirtatious glint. Just calm, steady, watching her like she is gravity. Her breath catches for a moment. Madison wants to speak, to say something, anything, but Johnny notices her staring and he asks, Why are you staring at me like that? His voice is soft, almost uncertain, a complete contrast to the confident bravado he usually wears like armor. Madison blinks, caught. Her lips part, but still, no words come out at first. She swallows hard, her heart thudding a little too loud in her ears. I did not mean to, she finally says in a whisper. It's just, she trails off. How could she explain it? How could she say she was memorizing the version of him she was not used to? That she was trying to understand the shift in his gaze, the way it made her feel seen instead of just watched? That the silence between them did not feel awkward anymore. It felt full. It's just different, she says quietly. You're different. Johnny holds her gaze for a beat longer, then a small smile form. Not his usual flirty smirk, but something softer, gentler. Maybe I am, he murmurs. Around you, I kind of want to be. And just like that, the air feels heavier. Not in a bad way, but in the kind of way where everything means just a little bit more than it did 5 seconds ago. Come on, let's go back inside or Reed will freak out again, Johnny says as he steps to the side to let Madison walk in front of him first, but Madison does not move right away. She looks at him for a beat longer, eyes soft, thoughtful, memorizing the way the shadows danced along his face, how the warmth in his gaze lingered without expectation. He was not rushing her. He was not pushing. He was just there, and somehow that made a difference. With a quiet smile tugging at the corner of her lips, she finally steps forward, brushing past him. Not cold, not distant, but close enough that her shoulder grazes his arm. She does not say anything. Not yet, but that small contact speaks volumes. Johnny watches her go, a faint grin pulling at his mouth as he shakes his head fondly. She was still a mystery, unpredictable, guarded, a little storm all her own. But she had not pulled away this time. She had not run, and that meant something. He follows her in, letting the balcony door slide shut behind them. The city fades out, replaced by the soft hum of the Baxter building and the low buzz of Reed's machines in the distance. The chaos of their world resumes. Experiments, powers, reporters, close calls. But something between them had shifted. Neither of them said it, but they both felt it. And as they walked down the hallway side by side, not touching, but somehow still connected, Madison allowed herself to believe that, just maybe, she did not have to do this all on her own. She did not have to keep running. Not when he was walking right beside her. Chapter 11, Halloween. 2 months later, 1st October 2006. The crispy smell of October air hits Madison as she walks outside in her disguise. She shapeshifted into another woman so she wouldn't get stopped by reporters or paparazzi. Madison reaches to her pocket to grab a list of things that Reed has asked her to get, but she breathes in and out to calm her nerves. But below the stuff Reed asked her to get, there was Susan's writing asking her to get Halloween stuff. The stuff Reed asked Madison to get was replacement batteries for lab equipment, not spooky lights. Industrial strength tape, a pack of light bulbs, lab-safe cleaning cloths, graph paper and mechanical pencils. The stuff Susan asked Madison to get for Halloween. Pumpkin lights for Madison's room balcony in the Baxter Common area. A few carved pumpkin kits, even though Johnny will probably make a mess. Spiderweb decorations for the lab doors. Reed reluctantly agrees. A big bowl and candy variety packs for trick-or-treaters, which Madison will have separate bags for, contains allergy and allergy-free. Orange and black streamers for the main lounge. A silly, haunted lab sign for Reed's workspace. He will pretend to hate it, but secretly like it. Madison's lips quirked as she traced Susan's handwriting with her thumb. She could practically hear Susan's voice, soft but with that hint of playful insistence, as if she'd added the Halloween section while Reed wasn't looking. Her disguise kept her face hidden, but it couldn't mask the small warmth building in her chest. The list wasn't just errands. It was a quiet reminder she belonged here now. Okay, let's get this over and done with, Madison mutters quietly to herself before walking into the store. The first stop was a cramped electronics store tucked between a laundromat and a coffee shop. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and warm plastic. Madison grabbed the batteries and light bulbs first, resisting the urge to buy the multicolored party bulbs she knew would make Johnny grin. No, stick to Reed's list, though he really needs to live a little. The tape and graph paper were easy enough, though she lingered over the pencils. She could already picture Reed holding one like it was the most essential tool in human history, then immediately misplacing it in the middle of a project. Her second stop was a discount home goods store, bright, chaotic, and already half covered in orange and black displays. This was clearly Susan's territory. Madison's eyes lit up when she spotted the pumpkin lights, already imagining them strung across her balcony railing, casting a soft glow over the city at night. The pumpkin carving kits were stacked near the door. She picked out 3, hesitating before grabbing a 4th. One extra for when Johnny inevitably snaps a carving tool, trying to speed carve a jack-o'-lantern. Spiderweb decorations went into the basket next, her mind instantly conjuring Reed's inevitable lecture about dust particle interference, before he would quietly leave them up for weeks after Halloween. In the candy aisle, Madison's cart filled quickly chocolate bars, lollipops, gummy worms, each bag mentally sorted into allergy and allergy-free piles. The big glass bowl for the lobby candy was heavier than she expected, and she smirked at the thought of Johnny taste-testing every other piece before the kids even arrived. Streamers and the haunted lab sign came last, the sign's cartoon ghost winking at her from the packaging. She grinned, knowing full well Reed would make a show of rolling his eyes, but never actually take it down. By the time she was done, Madison's messenger bag was stuffed with Reed's practical supplies, and her shopping cart was brimming with Halloween chaos. Stepping back out into the brisk October air, Madison couldn't help but feel lighter. The list had started as errands, but now it felt like something more preparing for a home that was hers, in ways big and small. Arriving at the Baxter building, Madison tenses slightly as the alarm goes off, as she didn't shapeshift back to herself. "Shit! Shit!" Madison says before walking over to the alarm and presses the buttons to stop the alarm after shapeshifting back to herself. "What the hell was that?" Johnny yells as he comes downstairs as he sees Madison. Madison looks over to Johnny, and she does a little smile as she says, "Long story, but I have what Reed asked me to get." Madison lifts up 2 bags. Johnny didn't press. He lingered for a moment, reading her expression like he wanted to ask more, but knew better. But he walks over to her and takes one of the bags off her and starts to help her pack away. "So, how do you feel about Halloween coming?" Johnny asks as he looks over to Madison, catching, just for a second. How the soft waves of her hair framed her face. How the white strapless dress made her look almost untouchably perfect. He forced his eyes back to hers before she noticed, keeping his tone light, casual, like he hadn't just forgotten what he was about to say. "That depends. Are you planning on dressing up or just setting things on fire again?" Madison says with a little playfulness tease in her tone, not knowing that Johnny is looking at her. 3 weeks later, 31st October, 2006. Madison stopped getting dressed as she's now wearing a black lacy witch dress with high heels. Her hat is on the bed as Madison has found her diary. "Wow, my old diary," Madison mutters to herself before looking through the pages, but stops at the certain page. She read the words silently at first, then in a hushed whisper as though she could still be overheard. The hallway was loud, but it felt like all the noise was underwater. My chest was tight, my hands shaking. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment Johnny finally saw me the way I saw him. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she kept going. But instead, he looked at me like I was nothing. And then he said it. "You're nothing but trash to me." Just like that, loud enough for people to hear. Loud enough for them to laugh. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even defend myself. I just walked away so he wouldn't see me cry. Madison's throat tightened. She could still hear the echo of his voice, still feel the way her stomach had dropped, still remember how hard it had been to keep walking. She shut the diary slowly, the weight of the memory lingering in her chest. From the hallway, Reed's voice called for her. Madison set the diary beside her hat, slipped on her other heel, and took a deep, steadying breath before stepping out of her room. masking the shadow in her eyes with a faint, practiced smile. Madison thinks to herself as she looks over to Johnny, who is talking to Ben, and she does a little smile, knowing that he's slowly gaining her trust, but she doesn't want to burden him with the memories of the past. After a while, late at night, Madison walks over to the balcony as Party, feeling overwhelmed by everyone there. She doesn't know that Johnny followed. "You hiding out here?" Johnny's voice came from behind her, softer than usual, stripped of its usual cocky edge. Madison glances over her shoulder and saw him leaning against the doorframe, his pirate costume jacket slightly askew, hair a little messy from the night's chaos. "Just taking a break," she said, turning back to the skyline. He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne mixing with the crisp night air. "You okay?" She hesitated. "Yeah, just needed some quiet." For a moment they both stayed in silence, the city stretched endlessly in front of them, lights twinkling like stars on the ground. Johnny's gaze lingered on her profile. The way the moonlight caught in her hair, the faint shadow in her eyes she probably thought she'd hidden well. Johnny walks over to Madison and holds out his hand. "Dance with me?" Johnny asks softly, and Madison looks confused. "There's no music out here," Madison says, but she feels Johnny pulling her close after taking her hand. "There's always music," he said with a small smile. "You just have to listen for it." He started to sway them, slow and unhurried, the faint rhythm from inside barely reaching their ears. Madison let herself follow his lead, her heels clicking softly against the concrete as they moved. Of course, neither of them spoke for a while. It wasn't rushed or awkward. It was quiet, in a way that felt rare between them. Comfortable, and a little fragile, like a moment they both knew could break if they pushed too hard. Johnny's eyes kept flicking to hers, but he didn't press her for words. Madison felt the tension she'd been carrying all night loosen just a little, her body relaxing into the rhythm. The city lights blurred softly behind him, and for the first time in hours she let herself smile. Not the polite one she gave guests, but a small, real one. And then, neither of them stopped to think. Her gaze lifted to meet his hand tightening slightly at her waist. A breath hitched between them. And then they were leaning in at the same time, closing the space like it had always been meant to happen. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft but unhesitating, the kind that bypassed every question and went straight to instinct. Madison's free hand found the lapel of his jacket, while his slid up her back, pulling her closer against him. It wasn't long, but it was enough to leave them both breathless when they pulled back, their foreheads still almost touching. Johnny let out a quiet, shaky laugh, his thumb brushing against her hand. "Guess there really was music out here," he murmured. Madison's lips curved into a faint smile. "Yeah, guess there was." Through the glass doors, Susan stood with a drink in her hand, having paused mid-conversation when she'd glanced outside. Reed followed her gaze, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. A moment later, Ben shuffled up beside them, his eyes softening at the sight. None of them said anything. They just watched for a few seconds, the corners of their mouths lifting in quiet approval before they turned back to the party, leaving Johnny and Madison to their moment. The party ends, 11 p.m. Johnny and Madison walks back into the building talking. Madison does a slight yawn before laying on the couch. Johnny watches her fall asleep before picking her up carefully and carrying her to her bedroom and lays her on her bed, and he was about to leave, but Madison grabs his arm. "Sleep next to me," Madison says sleepily. Johnny paused mid-step, glancing over at Madison. She was curled up under the blanket, her voice groggy and quiet when she'd spoken. For a second, he almost thought he'd imagined it. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he walked over, crouching beside her. "Yeah?" He murmured, his tone low and gentle, almost like he was afraid to wake her too much. She shifted slightly, eyes half closed, and he could see that little vulnerable crease between her brows that always showed when she was tired. Without teasing or making a joke, something old Johnny might have done, he just nodded. "All right, Mads." He eased himself onto the bed beside her, the mattress dipping under his weight. She instinctively leaned into his warmth, and Johnny let out a quiet breath, his arm settling loosely around her waist. "Get some rest," he whispered, though his own eyes felt heavy now. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to be anywhere else. After a while, he falls asleep next to her, holding her.